Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you happen to be watching this. I hope you're having a great day. Today, I want to spend some time going over some basics to help you prep for the research paper. As always, all borrowed images and quoted text are used for educational purposes. I'm not a professional YouTuber. That first part should be obvious because there won't be any edits. But the second part is I'm not monetizing this. This is just an effort for me to help my students, especially those who miss class. Basic, number one, everything's an argument. And because everything's an argument, there needs to be a claim. There may need to be qualifiers. May need, or there definitely will be, reasons, evidence, and data. The data cannot speak for itself, so therefore it needs to be warranted. And sometimes the warrants need backing. An argument is not screaming and shouting at each other. An argument is not the idea of being the loudest person in the room. An argument is a structured way of presenting your belief system and a way of making it logical for everyone to be able to follow and then to respond to. An argument is a form of communication, not a form of shouting. Let's start with developing the claims and the warrants. Step one, start with the research and evidence. I know it's always tempting to start with, this is what I want to prove, and find the evidence that backs you up. But I think it's always best to start with the research and start with the evidence and move forward instead of backward. Create the thesis based on that evidence. Again, step one is the evidence, step two is the thesis. Obviously, you're going to have some subpoints. You're going to have some reasons for the thesis. For example, my thesis is that bacon is the ultimate food. My subpoints or reasons include it has salt, it has fat, and it tastes good with everything from eggs to powdered sugar jelly donuts. All of those things are subpoints and reasons inherent in the thesis that bacon is the ultimate food. The subpoints in my paper, Bacon is the Ultimate Food, will become the claims that get developed in the body of the paper. Those claims will always go back to the thesis, and those claims will need to have warrants that link them to the evidence. Okay, I don't think we need tons of evidence that bacon has fat, tons of evidence that bacon has salt. I may need to, find a bit of evidence about its link to great flavor with powdered sugar jelly donuts. But each and every one of those needs to have a warrant that says this is why it's an ultimate food. Why is having fat part of making it an ultimate food? Why is having salt part of making it an ultimate food? Why is being able to taste good with powdered sugar jelly donuts part of making it an ultimate food? Both of those things need to be put together. The warrants have to link to the evidence, and the warrants have to get me all the way back up to the thesis as well. Let me give you a really bad but serviceable example. Let's assume that as I do my research, I find out that there's a lot of research out there that says hotel bathtubs are slippery. My claim, my thesis, whatever you want, is going to be don't dance while showering in a hotel bathtub. The warrant is going to be you don't want strangers to see you lying on a floor naked and crying. I perhaps need to put a step in there someplace about if I dance in the shower, I will slip and fall. If I slip and fall, I will be lying on the floor when the maid comes to see me. I will be naked and crying because I'm in deep pain, and she will call the paramedics. So it'll be the maid, it'll be the paramedics. You get the drift. But for the purposes of just this example, I start with the research, I make the claim, I have some warrants to try to tie the research and the claim together, the data and the claim together. As we talk about the thesis, 3 or 4 things I think are just super important. Number 1, the thesis needs to come from the research. You should always start with the research. And again, I know it's tempting. I know it's very tempting to say, I'm going to say this. Let me find some stuff that backs me up. Start with the research first. Next, it provides a roadmap for the reader and it provides a roadmap for the writer. This is what I want to show. The writer can therefore just look at, does everything here get me to what I want to show? The reader gets to know, this is where it's going, this is where I want to follow along, this is where I want to get to at the end. A thesis, as in some ways the ultimate claim, the big overarching claim of the paper, will usually be something that others might dispute. Some people who are dancers may say dancing in a hotel shower that is slippery is great practice. They might dispute that. Some people might dispute the warrant. I don't know if there are people who are into pain and are also exhibitionists. It's entirely possible. Less disputable is the fact that it's usually at the end of the first paragraph. Again, I realize that this is an arbitrary thing, but to go back to my rather silly example, it is also arbitrary that the red light means stop and the green light means go. Think about, we have lots of arbitrary things in our lives. This is just another one of them. The warrants. The ultimate question is, how exactly do I get from the data to the claim? The warrants do that. The warrants allow the readers to determine the presuppositions, the unstated assumptions. And I think it's important to understand that sometimes the warrants may require backing, they may require evidence as well. But for the most part, your big thing is, here's the data, here's the claim, especially the subpoints of your thesis. Here's the data, here's those subpoints that are functioning as claims. How do I get from there? And again, I think you sometimes have to have some warrants, some backing to get your subpoints into your thesis as well. Useful warrants, I think, do a few things. Number 1, they provide original thought about the quotation, the concrete data, the details. They avoid stating the obvious. And they tell the reader something the reader may not have already figured out. If you look at the little bit of artwork or whatever you want to call it on this slide, this wall is not clean anymore, is a prime example of a statement of the obvious. This wall is not clean anymore does not really give you any original thought because, again, it's a statement of the obvious. And any reader walking past that wall will know it's not clean because they will read the graffiti. Don't state the obvious. Don't tell the reader something they've already figured out. Work to provide an original thought about the quotation. As you write the warrants, you should begin in your pre-writing, you should begin in your rough draft, you should begin anytime you think about the claims you want to make and the data you have, you should be thinking about the warrants that's put the two together. A phrase like this shows that. This also shows that. This is important because this reveals that. This implies that. All of phrases like this, all of these, do a great job of letting you figure out in your own head, what is the warrant doing? Why is the warrant there? Why is the data there? How does the data link to the claim? How does the claim link to the data? When you're writing, though, get rid of those phrases. As much as possible, work to get rid of those phrases in your final draft. A few other things to avoid. Don't use the data as the warrant. And don't create warrants that don't relate to the claim. Don't create warrants that contradict the claim. And I've seen all of these things in research papers. I've seen all of these things in argumentative essays. Work to avoid that. And finally, don't be repetitious. Don't have repeating warrants. Each warrant should be new. Each warrant should be something that develops the link in a different way. Let's try to look at some examples. A generic warrant. Dancing in the hotel bathtub is unsafe. That is really generic. So think about dancing in hotel bathtubs can cause eternal injuries, broken bones, and lifelong embarrassment. At least there's words there that are specific, that apply, I hope, uniquely to dancing in a hotel bathtub. And so I think it's important to think about, can you move beyond the generic and get to some specific ideas that help the reader understand what's going on? Next, think about the idea of avoiding repetition. Dancing in the hotel bathroom tub is unsafe. Dancing in the hotel bathtub is dangerous. Both of those are the same thing. If it's dangerous, it's unsafe. If it's unsafe, it's dangerous. Don't repeat it yourself. And using two different words or using synonyms is still a way to just repeat yourself. So, dancing in hotel bathtubs is risky. That gives me unsafe and dangerous, because one can fall, break bones, and lie whimpering in the middle of the bathroom floor until the maid finds you. Once again, it's more concrete. There are the statement of risk, and then there's examples, and it builds on itself. Don't repeat, don't be generic. There are qualifiers. Your thesis is going to be debatable. Sometimes your warrants will be debatable. So, few, often, usually are all things that you can probably put in the claim to make it a little bit better. Give yourself the loophole. Give yourself the loophole to avoid being boxed in completely. Typically, arguably, all of those should help you help the debate focus on the big picture instead of specifics that, to use the cliche, are exceptions that prove the rule. Body paragraphs. 3 things here. Took this from Strunk and White. I think Strunk and White is one of the great handbooks of all time. I know it's over 100 years old. I still think it's one of the great handbooks of all time. I've gotten several papers this semester. I got papers last semester. I think I've gotten papers every semester I've taught without paragraphs. A research paper of 5 to 6 pages, is going to require subdivision into topics. And each of those topics should be the subject of a paragraph or a block of paragraphs. You're trying to aid the reader. Treating each topic in a paragraph aids the reader. It helps the reader understand that there's a new step in the development, that You've ended one step and you've moved on to the next. Use the paragraph. The big bold print about one paragraph to each topic. Look, that's a guideline, but in a 5 to 6 page paper, not a 5 to 6 word paper, 5 to 6 page paper, I think it's important to think through this idea of blocks of paragraphs developing the topic. But you still need the paragraphs, and you still need to signal to your reader that a new step in the development of the subject has been reached. Paragraph's a group of sentences that supports a single idea, in this case, the paper's thesis. They are the building blocks. The paragraph should be the building block of the paper. It should be the foundation of the paper. And so think about it in that way. You've got your picture here of the little building blocks. Build up to the top. Find a way to make sure that each idea is developed within a different block. Each paragraph obviously should be related to the thesis. It should have a topic sentence that unifies it. It should follow a specific order. And again, claim, data, warrant, that chunk sort of paragraph should work well. And it should be developed so that the evidence and the details fit together. It should be a unified piece within a unified whole. And again, I think most of your paragraphs should just kind of follow the CDWWDWW. Or at least the blocks of paragraphs should follow that. Claim. Some data. Some warrants. Some more warrants. Perhaps add a little more data. Some more warrants. And some more warrants. Claim, data, warrant. And when in doubt, add a few more warrants. Add a bit more data. And some more warrants. Couple of just quick things about the format. I think there's always two ways to go about an essay. One is to do the hook, and remember that the hook, the attention getter, is the same thing as the hook in music. The hook in music is that line and that musical and the combination of notes that gives you the earworm that sticks in your head all day. The hook in an essay, I think, should be the first couple of sentences, and the title should probably be part of that as well. The thing that gets the reader wanting to keep moving. The intro should always have the major points, and it should always have the thesis. If you're writing a shorter paper, if you're writing an essay test, I think the best thing to do is forget the hook, forget trying to be fancy, throw out the thesis statement, list your major points, and get to writing. Okay? The research paper, the connection paper that you're going to write probably should have a hook. The rest of them, you could probably begin with the thesis and just keep moving. Remember that the body, and this should be review, topics follow the order presented in the introduction. The topic sentence should state the major point or subpoint the paragraph is going to develop. There should be some facts, some stats, some analogies, some concrete examples, some data. Not a repetition of the topic sentence, not a repetition of claims. There should be some explanation, and there should be some more explanation. Claim, data, warrant. And remember, when you get to the body, the conclusion, when you get to the conclusion, restate the thesis, sum up your points, provide a final observation and ending. I hope this has proved helpful. I hope that everybody has a good day who's watching this. and I hope to see you all in class the next class period.